These are Fyne Audio F5E standmount speakers, part of the F500E Series, the latest offering from this relatively new Scottish company. The F500E Series is set to replace the older F300E Series, which was their previous entry-level range. Unlike the F300i, the F500E packs in a lot of high-end features. The IsoFlare point source driver, the company's signature design, it is set to deliver precise sound imaging, clean mid-range and deep controlled bass. Essentially a type of coaxial driver where the mid-bass cone is made of multi-fiber paper with fine flute roll surround, and the tweeter is made of titanium dome with neodymium magnet motors. These drivers were previously only available in their flagship models. The bass track port system, a downward firing port designed to channel bass energy out of the cabinet for deeper and more controlled bass. They have also used high-quality parts like low-loss laminated core inductors and high-grade polypropylene film capacitor for the crossover, high-purity copper for internal wiring to ensure the signal purity and clarity. The high-rigidity MDF construction helps minimize unwanted vibrations and resonance. That is a lot of high promises, but before we get into how the F5E sounds, let's take a look at their specs. I really like the look of these F5E. The black ash finish is lovely and gives them a very classy appearance. They definitely remind me of the Tannon Gold series monitors. They don't weigh a lot but feel quite solid in hand. They certainly don't sound hollowed inside. Based on my measurements, the frequency response of the F5E is fairly flat, with no more than 3 dB bumps or dip, except for a 5 dB dip from 6 kHz to 7.5 kHz and a 6 dB rise to 12.5 kHz. This might be due to the coaxial driver design. Looking at the axis graph, it shows similar behavior when on axis, but when off axis, those frequency dips smooth out and resemble an X-curve frequency response. From 12 kHz onwards, there's a dip followed by a rise, where the volume drops between 3 to 6 dB from 20 degree to 45 degree off axis, which is expected for a small pair of speakers. I'm usually not too fussy about the speaker's placement, but when I set up the F5E speakers with my Marantz Cinema 70s and placed them next to my TV, the first thing I noticed was the lack of bass, let alone sub-bass. That said, they did produce quite defined bass. Despite the rich mid-range on display, the soundstage just simply sounded wrong. Considering the amounts of tech they put in, they couldn't sound this disappointing. So I put them on a higher stand and spread them out away from the TV, and then everything clicked. Not that they have crazy amount of bass now, but they started to sound right, and they started to sound good. So with my setup, the bass track port needs room to breathe, and the driver needs to be at ear level to sound right. Fyne Audio suggests roughly 40 hours of burned-in time in the manual. During that time, I tried the speakers with my limited collection of amps. These speakers are on the warm side, but not as warm as Wafdal, and they're not difficult to drive. They're not too picky with gear matching, but are capable of showcasing the different characteristics of the amps. However, it wouldn't make much sense to pair them with higher tier gear. Despite my Sim Audio Select PW4000 offering a more open, faster and weighty sound, this flexibility isn't beneficial, as I will explain later in my review. I opt for an amp with more modest budget, the Yamaha RN500 with a Wim Mini streamer. This combination provides a wide soundstage and warmer, fuller mid-range. My music will be from Tidal. Usually, I like to test with and without the room EQ correction. However, there's no need with these speakers since the amount of EQ needed is quite minimal. Of course, your mileage might vary, but in my room, it's not necessary. As I mentioned earlier, the first thing I noticed was the lack of bass, and I'm not someone who needs a lot of it. Listening to Playing God by Polivia is evidence of this. Although the bass is light, there's still a hint of sub-bass coming through, and it is quite well defined. Fyne Audio states that these speakers can go as low as 55 Hz, and while it does feel like they reach that low, they lack the heft that one might expect. Besides that, they are quite good at keeping pace with the track. I never lose sight of the guitars playing, backing and harmonizing with each other. Each element, from the transient overhang of the background synth to each beat of the drum parts, has room to shine through. Put on significance from the Nier Automata original soundtrack to experience the vastness of the void, accompanied by a single stroke of the piano and strings. This track excels at creating a sense of scale. While the speakers have a wide soundstage, they lack some height and depth. Nevertheless, they still sound bigger than their size suggests. It's not just the size of the soundstage they can create, but also how precise and focused they are with element placement. When listening to Bubbles by Yoshi Horikawa, the F5E speakers can show you exactly where each ball lands within this busy soundscape. In this regard, the F5E can match the Focal Cora 806. Considering the 806 are larger in both cabinet and driver size, that's quite impressive. One strange quirk I found in the F5E is their resolving power. I mentioned they performed well with Playing God by Polivia. In the intro of Easy on Me by Adele, they almost managed to showcase the resonance of the notes and the sound of the hammers striking on the strings in the piano. However, in Jack of Speed by Steely Dan, the shaker in the background is almost inaudible. In some instances, they deliver clarity, but they miss out on some elements entirely in others. Sometimes their resolving power is a bit hit or miss, but their mid-range performance is consistently admirable. Put on Adele, Norah Jones, or Judith Owen, their vocals are expressive with an almost silky quality. The vocals can also get quite intimate. They handle male vocals like Chris Jones decently well too. As long as you don't throw the Fairfield 4 at them, they should perform just fine. One of the best tricks of the F5E is the ability to flow with the emotion of a track. When listening to Saint Denis by Roy Hargrove, the double bass is well defined, that hint of sub-bass, adding just enough weight to each plug. The saxophones sound natural with enough bite but without sounding harsh. These speakers are agile enough to showcase the playfulness of the piano. As the song builds up, the energy follows. This quality also lends itself well to classical music. When playing Town with an Ocean View by Joe Hisaishi, the dynamics aren't dramatic, but they're enough to convey the emotion throughout the piece. If you're looking for a pair of speakers to rock out with, unfortunately, the F5E falls a bit short. This is why I don't pair these with fast amps. Listening to Panic Attack by Dream Theater, each instrument is equally displayed and the drum beats and guitar riffs are easy to follow, but the overall sound is quite flat. The same goes for By Crooked Steps by Soundgarden. It sounds a bit more aggressive, the snaring and the guitar riffs carry some energy, but it feels suppressed. Chris Cornell's voice ends up whining at you rather than screaming his lungs out. On the upside, when these speakers are pushed, they manage to hold their composure. If you're looking for your first pair of speakers and mainly listen to acoustic, jazz, or classical music, you should give this a try. They offer admirable mid-range performance, the ability to keep pace, convey emotion with the music, and create a stable stereo image with a decent sense of scale. They're also capable of displaying different mixes across various tracks. These are good attributes for small speakers. However, they also come with the typical limitations of small speakers. They're light on bass, even slightly less compared to some other small speakers I know, despite producing fairly deep, well-textured bass. And their slightly questionable resolving power just makes me scratch my head. So this might not be an upgrade if you already own a pair of decent stand-mount speakers. For £399, it's not a lot to ask considering the effort Fyne Audio put into these F5E. However, there are many options in the budget segments that can perform almost as well, and that's without even considering the second-hand market. Not to mention the budget range they are replacing is also competing at a much lower price. Ultimately, in my opinion, they fall short in versatility. That said, judging by how the F5E sound, the real promise might lie with their floor-standing sibling, the F501E. But again, they need to sound at least 2 notches better, given their much higher price bracket at £999. The competition at that price point is also fierce, to say the least. I hope you liked this video. If you find this review useful, please leave a like and subscribe to support my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.